welcome to another episode of Rita Reads and talks about books while putting on makeup. Brought to you from beautiful St. Croix Falls, Wisconsin. So today I'm going to talk to you about a book called The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. And I cannot remember the name of the author because I'm a middle-aged woman and I can't remember everything all the time, okay? I'm doing the best I can. I have a broken neck. I'm doing the best I can, okay? So The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. This is a story. It starts off in 18th century France and in mid 18th century, maybe even a little bit toward late 18th century, like 1780s, I think, in a small village outside of Paris, but outside of Paris far enough that it doesn't, like the people in this little village never have any experience with city life at all because they're far enough removed from the village back in the day when they're just using horses and carriages to get by that they never interact with city life at all. And this is a small town where a young girl, age 16, 15, 16, lives with her mother and her father and her old neighbor lady whose name is Estelle in this small town where nothing really ever changes, nothing exciting happens. But it's a beautiful little town by the edge of a wood and a river. And her daddy is a wood carver, and he makes these glorious creations with wood and brings them to the nearest town, which isn't Paris, but it's a bigger town. I can't remember the name of it, on the edge of Paris to sell. So Addie begs Daddy to take him with her. Her name is Adeline, really, but she likes to go by Addie. He takes her with him to go to the town to sell his woodwares one day. And she finds out there's this whole world beyond her village, and she's thrilled by it. And on the way, her dad even tells her stories, fairy tales, and all kinds of things that just kind of expand her mind and open her up. And she realizes she's meant for bigger things, and she becomes curious about the world around her in a way she really hadn't been before, because before she went on that trip with her dad, all she really knew was her small little town. Well, that opens her up and she starts to become very, very curious about the world. Well, in the meantime, in her little tiny provincial home, her best friend marries, because they're at the marrying age, and has kids right away and starts to live the life of all the people in her town, where she's a mother and a wife, and that's really it. Now, her best friend is happy in that role. That's the role that they're raised to be in. She's happy in it. But Addie starts to wonder and worry, could that possibly be a role she'd be happy in? She doesn't think so, and she starts to scheme and think, how could she live a wider life? She doesn't want anything to do with living a life like her mother did, or like her best friend is now living. So Estelle, the old lady who lives next to her, is just an amazing woman. She's been alone. She's lived alone. She's a widow, and she's lived alone most of her life. Her children are dead. She doesn't have any children. She's lived alone in this small stone cottage, and she becomes Addie's spiritual guide and best friend. And she believes in all these mystical things, and teaches Addie how to use roots and herbs. But she warns Addie all the time, never pray to the dark gods. Even though the village is Catholic and Addie goes to church every Sunday, she's not totally sure about religion, but she doesn't believe in any of the old gods like Estelle does. Estelle believes in what they call the old gods, and Estelle prays to them all the time and teaches Addie about them, but she says, Addie, never, never, never pray to the dark gods. Never pray to gods who come to you in the dark. Well, what happens is Addie thinks it's all nonsense, of course, because she's a good Catholic girl in this village and thinks Estelle is just an old lady talking nonsense. Well, suddenly it comes to pass that her father and mother pick a good suitor for Adeline, and they say, Adeline, this is going to be the man that you're going to marry. Prepare yourself to be his bride. It's time. Well, the boy that they choose for her is a perfectly nice boy. He's handsome and he seems charming, and if Addie weren't the person she was, with this heart that kind of wants to wander and a need to explore the world. He might have been the perfect guy for her, but she doesn't want that for her life. She wants more. She doesn't want to sink into a provincial world and stay in this small town for the rest of her life. So she's desperate. She can't stop thinking about how she can change her circumstance, but she also can't really figure out a way to change her circumstance. So she's thinking about it all the time and pondering what she can do, coming up with nothing. So on the day of her wedding, she's in her gown, in this beautiful white lacy gown, and she is about to go to her wedding when she decides she just cannot do it. And she runs off into the woods and stays there hiding until nightfall. Now remember what Estelle told her. She said, beware of the dark gods. Never pray to the dark gods. Beware the dark gods. Well, of course, what does she do? Prays to the dark gods. Please, please save me. I need more. I need more. I need something. I need more time. I need more time. I can't marry this. I can't become a provincial girl like all the rest of the people in this town. And sure enough, that prayer is heard by one of the dark gods. And this dark god takes the shape. This Addie, I didn't mention, she has, on one of the trips with her father to town, she has bought paper and charcoal pencils, and she's become just an absolutely beautiful illustrator. And she illustrates what she thinks, she's like a little romantic girl, what her perfect dream man would look like, with what do they call it? Cupid's bow lips and black curly hair and just chiseled cheeks and just a gorgeous. Well, the dark god takes the form of her perfect boy that she has drawn for herself. And he speaks to her at night and says, whatever you wish, I'll give you, Addie. I can give you anything you wish. And all you have to give me in return is your soul. And she does. Okay, honest to God. Would you do that? No, you wouldn't. Nobody would. It only happens in books, right? I don't think it would ever happen in real life. So anyway, she makes a deal essentially with the devil, or this dark god. It's not the devil. I don't know what it is, but it's a devilish creature. So she makes a deal. And the deal she makes with him is she will live as long as she chooses to. And she will be able to go on, as many adventures as she wants to and live this incredible life. However, when she gets done with it, when she chooses she's done, then her soul goes to this dark god, who she eventually names Luke. The dark god's called Luke. Funny name for a dark god, but that's what his name is. So that's what happens. Well, little does she know the dark god's kind of tricky. And, anytime you're kind of dealing with the devil, you're going to want to consider the fact that the devil is tricky and has, a millennia of experience up against your, she's 19 years old when she made this decision. So he is smarter than you. So he does it, but the way he does it, so he casts this spell. So she now can live forever, and she doesn't have to marry this guy. So she'll get to live, her wish was to live a life free of convention. She didn't want to live the conventional life. So she makes this deal with Luke to live a life free of convention. And the way he made that happen, though, was to make it so she could live forever, but no one would remember her. So she would not be known by anybody. So not only would she not be known, so she could have these beautiful relationships with people for hours. But the second she left their sight, they would no longer know who she was. They couldn't even say her name. She couldn't say her name. So she leaves and she goes back to her house the next morning after she makes this deal with Luke. She goes back to her house, and her parents don't recognize her, of course, because she has changed. They don't, the deal has made it so that she is invisible, and that's why it's called The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, because now she's invisible to everybody. So she lives every day. And in fact, in the book, she goes on for 300 years living like this. She lives for 300 years but nobody ever knows her. So she has these long relationships with people where every day she meets them anew and they think it's the first time they've met her. But of course, she has known them day after day after day, and it's just an absolutely lonely existence. She learns so much and she, travels the world and she sees the French Revolution and she sees both world wars and experiences continents and movements and just an incredible life, but she does it essentially alone until one day she goes into a bookshop in New York City. She finds she loves New York City and lives there for like 100 years and never gets tired of it. And she always finds there's new things to do and see and doesn't get tired of it at all. Now, you'd think she would just give up and surrender herself to Luke and say, all right, I'm done. I'm done. I surrender my soul. I can't go on like this anymore. But she's super stubborn and Luke keeps visiting her and she will not give up the fight. So she's just not going to. She'll live forever, even if she's alone, just so Luke doesn't win. She just won't let this devil win. So she goes into this bookshop and she's so used, because no one can remember her. She can't make friendships. She can't own things. She can't get jobs. She can't live in houses because even if she goes and rents a house and stays there the next morning, people don't know who she is or what she's doing there. So she's constantly living this vagabond existence where she's having to break and enter to find places to sleep and she has to steal. She can't get money on her own. So it's a constant outlaw existence. So she goes into this bookshop and she wants to read a book. So she steals the book, which is how she does everything. And the guy chases her out of the store and says, hey, what are you doing? You're stealing that book. You got to give it back, like they always do. But generally what happens is she gets out of their sight and then they totally forget it happened. So she's home free. So that's what she does. So she's home free and she's fine and she leaves the store. So the next day she decides she's going to go back, or maybe it's a week later, I don't know. She's going to go back into the store and get another book to read. So she goes back into the store, but this guy who works at the bookstore, who very coincidentally has a, what I call that, like a Cupid's bow mouth with little black curly hair, just like Luke, and bright green eyes, just like Luke, remembers her. He says, hey, I know you. You're the girl who stole my book. What are you doing here? Well, it's the first time in 300 years anybody has remembered Addie. She is aghast. She can't believe it. She doesn't even know what to do. Well, these two strike up a friendship, of course. Come to find out that this guy, this bookstore owner, has also made a deal with Luke, the devil, who he doesn't know is Luke. He knows as someone else. He has made a deal with him. But his deal was, Luke was kind of the bookstore guy. I think his name is Henry. I think so. I can't remember. Like I said, getting old, middle-aged, can't remember everything. I remember the big ideas, the small things, not so much. Anyway, let's call him Henry. I think his name was Henry. Turns out Henry has also made a deal with this dark god. And his deal was, he felt like an underachiever his whole life. He could never do anything that he felt met people's expectations for him. His girlfriend that he just was absolutely in love with had just left him. And he just wanted people to love him and accept him and think he was enough as he was. So he makes this deal with the dark god that people will think he's good enough, that when people look at him, they'll see he's enough instead of wanting more or seeing him as a loser who couldn't live up to the expectations of his amazing family. So the dark god grants him that for 1 year. And at the end of that 1 year of people seeing him as perfect, that's it. His soul goes to the dark god. Well, then here's what happens. Everyone who sees him as this perfect, and it turns out he hates it, because who wouldn't hate that? It's horrible to feel like people put you on a pedestal. It's a terrible feeling. And so he hated it. Then when he meets Addie, turns out they're both immune to the spells that were put on them by the dark god. So he can see her and remember her, and she is not totally bowled over by him as being perfect. And they fall into this perfect love for one another. But it's bound to end badly because he only has the 1 year. So in the end, something beautiful and tragic happens that I can't tell you about, but it's got a twist that will ring in your ears for a long time to come. And I think it's pretty amazing. The book was really good and I highly recommend it. I'm not even sure what genre to put it in. You might maybe historical fiction because you go in and out of eras and times, a little bit of romance, a little bit of mystery, a little bit of science fiction, a little bit of fantasy. I don't know. But let me just read you. I saved this quote for you because I think this sums up a lot of what the theme of the book was. It says this, I saved this for you. It says, the time always ends a second before you're ready. That life is the minutes you want minus one. And I love that. And I think one of the things that I kept thinking while I read this book that kept resonating with me is that we have to learn to be happy with what we have and not trade away what we have for some ridiculous fantasy about what we could have. And it was a beautiful read, and I hope you will read it. I will put the author and title in the comments. I will put my neck brace on right now. Here we go. Yeah, it's a really great process. Only 6 more weeks of the neck brace. Ha! Okay, thanks for watching, you guys. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I hope you read it, and I hope you love it. Stay there here. Happy reading, happy makeup putting on. I love you and I like you. Mwah, mwah, mwah.